Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Paul Falcone, best-selling author of numerous books, including 101 Tough Conversations to Have with Employees. He's also the former CHRO of Nickelodeon Animation Studios and the former CHRO of the Motion Picture Television Fund. And these days, he's doing a lot of consulting for some wonderful organizations all over the world. Paul, thank you for joining me.
No, my pleasure, Jacob. Very happy to be here.
Does anybody ever make any comments about your last name?
Yeah, yeah. It's a very Italian last name. And I can't remember, was it Batman?
Yes.
Spider-Man? One of the two. So the bad guy was Carmine Falcone. Well, that's my dad. So my father was like, "Hey, I'm finally famous, but I'm not getting any money for it." And I said, "Yeah, this is true, Dad, but it's good to be Carmine Falcone. It's a very popular name these days."
I was gonna say it's in all the Batman. What was the show that I was just watching? Penguin on
Yeah,
HBO with Colin Farrell, and there was the Falcone family who's in there as well. So you're all over the place, man.
we're always the good guys. So that's the
You
well,
gotta tap into that name for all of your consulting and all the book gigs and everything.
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah, but then I have
Um,
to use my dad's name, so it's a little different, but it's fine. It's close enough.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm excited to talk to you today because I think the theme of having tough conversations is very, very relevant, especially in today's world. And there are a lot of different areas to have tough conversations around. So I thought maybe we can start with just a little bit of background information about you. I know you were a chief human resource officer at several different organizations. So what was your path like and why write something about having tough conversations? Is it something that you had to do a lot during your career?
Yeah, I did. In the HR space, we call it employee relations. And so I was the one who was responsible for talking people off the ledge, for helping people kind of see things differently, change that perspective a little bit. And what I realized was it didn't matter where I worked. It's funny, Jacob, it's like people are people. And the path of least resistance is avoidance. And the managers usually sweep it under the rug and look the other way. They hope it fixes itself until some proverbial straw is broken on the camel's back, and then pow, the whole thing blows up. And then they would come running into my office in HR. And now they want the person fired. And I'm like, well, okay, slow down a little bit. Tell me what happened. And you have to walk them through this. But the whole idea of, collaboration and team building and trust and respect, part of it comes from recognition and calling people out for extraordinary effort or extraordinary achievement. But part of it is you have to help people master their craft and learn their trade. They want career and professional development. And that's not only telling them when they do a good job, but it's also telling them again how to course correct. How you do it is really what the whole point of that book was, and doing it from a coaching approach as opposed to making people feel judged. I mean, that's really where I think that book set itself apart. And when you give
Yeah.
people the script, it makes it easier for them because they can read it, they can customize it, but they kind of know where the conversation is going before they say the first word. And that's really what the key was.
Yeah, and I mean, the theme of tough conversations, I think, is not just relevant to the corporate world, but also to your personal life as well, right? I mean, we all have tough conversations all the time. Do you have a specific definition of how you uh, define what a tough conversation is?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically you're going to make someone wince. You're going to make them feel very uncomfortable. It's going to be something that hits them where they may know they already have a weakness, for example, and it kind of exacerbates a pain. So I think anytime you know you're going into that conversation, kind of preparing for it the right way so that you're in the right mind space is important. And it's important not to make people feel judged. Don't make them
Okay.
feel bad about themselves. Lift them up, come to it from a different strategy so that they see it's in their own best interest.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about how to have those conversations the right way. You mentioned something earlier, which is a lot of people avoid them. I can't remember which stat I was looking at. It was, I think it was last year, and I think it was on Harvard Business Review. But it was something like 70% of leaders around the world, they struggle having tough conversations or they try to avoid having those conversations with those employees just because it's weird, right? I mean, whether you're talking to an employee, whether it's a friend or a family member or somebody coming to do work on your house, oftentimes if people are unhappy or if they feel like they want to say something, they're just kind of like, well, maybe I'll just stay quiet. It's not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
They didn't destroy the house. They just messed up a little bit. So why do we avoid tough conversations in so many different aspects of our lives, both personally and professionally?
Because we're human beings and it's painful. And you don't want to escalate something. And I think there's always that fear that if I'm truly honest, they're going to get mad at me. They're going to be demotivated in the workplace, right? They're going to harbor a grudge. They're going to take it with them till the day they die. They're going to, and so you look the other way. And you're not a bad person for doing that. Look, I do that too at times. Pick your battles. Some things are not worth engaging in. But the problem is, again, I've worked in entertainment, I've worked in healthcare and biotech, I've worked in financial services. People are people. It doesn't matter. And it's like, you have to understand something. You can be someone's favorite boss, the best boss they've ever had, because you called them out on things, because you saw weaknesses that they didn't see themselves. And how you position it to them is not like, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? You always do, or you never do that. Those kinds of words, that kind of approach is going to make people shrink. The body language falls apart, falls together, it implodes. And then if anything, the reaction is anger. And it's anger on anger at that point. And you're not going to fix anything when people are angry. You need them to assume partial responsibility for the problem. So if you can kind of come to them and talk to them about, there's something that may be missing awareness that could hold you back over your career. And I want to share it with you if you'll allow me, but I also want to talk to you about what my expectations are. All of a sudden, you've set it doesn't really matter what you say after that, because now they're sitting up in their chair. And now they're listening because there's some benefit in it for them. And it's that simple. As long as we can kind of get into that mindset of giving constructive feedback, the reality is it's not as painful as you think, but it's still hard to convince managers that they can do. Well, I don't know. I like the script. I could see that, but I think it's going to be hard. And the greatest compliment I'll ever get, Jacob, is when people read that book and they say, Paul, I tried your script. I made it my own, of course. It worked. It was like you were a fly on the wall. They responded exactly the way you said in the book they would probably respond. Well, I'm not a soothsayer. I can't see the future, but I've done 10,000 of these phone calls over 3 decades. You know how people tend to respond. And that's why you can kind of map out a whole conversation back and forth, and kind of get them in the right mind space before they open up that dialogue.
So how do you get yourself in the mindset because you said that a lot of us, we avoid having tough conversations because we're human, we're scared of escalating, we're scared of being uncomfortable, we're scared of, I don't know, probably numerous things. How do you get past that to have a tough conversation? Because maybe you want to ask for a raise, maybe you want to tell your boss that they're not treating you well and they're being disrespectful to you. So how do you get I guess you would call it courage, the clarity, the motivation to actually have that tough conversation, regardless of what it is?
Yeah, think of giving something away as a gift. Seriously, now I write, generally speaking, my audience, Jacob, is management and how they lead their teams and how they grow their teams. So that's my orientation. But it's almost like this idea of, what's your greatest strength? What's your superpower? How do you give it away? Well, when you're a manager, you're measured through your people, right?
Yeah.
And you want to have the strongest team you can. And everyone's like, yep, that's right. Okay. And you want to keep them motivated and engaged and self-aware. Yep, that's right. Okay, well, that means you have to talk to them. They're like, that's the part that's hard, especially if it's a particular situation that is kind of thorny or is subject to interpretation. It's the person who says they're being oversensitive, I'm just being me, and I don't see why you're holding me to a higher standard than everyone else. And then the manager feels like, I don't know what to say now.
Yep.
And so they're kind of projecting all of this negative stuff because they filter everything in my books or everything that I train on. They filter through the worst employee they've ever had, right? This is normal. And I expect that from the audience or from the readers. But the reality is people, for the most part, want career and professional development. They studied the Gen Y and the Gen Z, the millennials and the Zoomers. They know everything about them. The most studied generational cohort in world history. We know what they want, and career and professional development is always in the top 5, if not the number 1. So it's like, what does that mean? And how do you contribute to that? And as a leader, what should you expect of yourself in terms of building that muscle of career and professional development among your employees? Part of it is recognition for a job well done, no doubt. But part of it is also this idea of helping people really feel more confident. I've always told managers, if you want to do one thing and one thing only to build a stronger team, just make people feel more self-confident. Don't make them afraid of you. That doesn't work. Not in an environment where we want innovation and creativity. They're not going to give discretionary effort. They're not going to take a risk if they're afraid of being called out by their boss. So managers have to unlearn some of the things that they've thought, which again, for a lot of managers, it's like to be an effective leader, you got to be feared.
Not easy. Yeah.
Not in today's day and age. Maybe that worked in the 1970s. That doesn't work anymore. So you kind of want to rethink what's going to work best for today's environment.
So would that, I mean, I love the visual of giving a gift. So that's from a leader perspective. And I guess when you visualize that you're giving a gift to one of your employees, the way that you approach it is going to be very different, right? You're going to sit down and have a conversation and say, "Hey, I have something I want to share with you," as opposed to come into my office and close the door like you really screwed up.
Yep.
I mean, that's a terrible gift, right? If that's what you're giving people. Um, so the visual of a gift, I really like that. And I think it'll change your tone and your behavior. But what if you're an employee giving feedback to a leader? Do you have the same mentality there as I'm giving my leader a gift, or is it slightly different because the balance of power is shifted?
Yeah, it's different because it's a different balance of power. You hit the nail on the head. What I would always do with my teams is I always had a safe word. And the safe word was, for me, permission. You can use any word you want. But permission meant if I said to someone on my team, "Hey, Jacob, permission," and they'd be like, "Uh-oh, okay, Paul, what did I do?" It's like, "Nothing, but come in, let's talk about this because I see something that I want to share with you." But
Yeah.
it worked both ways. If you came up to me and you said, "Hey, Paul, permission," I'd be like, okay, Jacob, what did I do? Tell me, right? And the same thing with peers. I want people on my team to be able to use one word. Just break through all the noise. You don't have to worry about stepping on eggshells, hurting people's feelings. We're just adults. We're coming together to solve things. So that safe word approach worked really well for me and my teams. If you have a boss that doesn't use a safe word, for example, or whatever, and you feel like you have trust and respect in that relationship, you can
Yeah.
talk to them very easily. If, on the other hand, you don't really trust your boss, it becomes very, very difficult to make yourself vulnerable because your body language is open when you make yourself vulnerable and you feel like, you know what, if this person's going to take a shot at me, I have no defense whatsoever. And so the
Yep.
body language closes up real quick. And it's not a perfect world. It's easier to teach this from manager to staff than it is from staff to manager. But I'm going to make the same argument. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, as we learned in the second grade. So it's like, yeah, this can work going both ways too.
Yeah. It is. I guess it is a lot harder if you're an employee trying to have the conversation with your boss, just because like that balance of power. And I mean, your boss at work can make your life hell if they want. Like they have the power, the control. They can put you on projects that are uncomfortable. They can make you switch teams. They could probably tinker with your salary, with your bonus. So they have a lot of control and power and authority over you, whereas you don't. So I suppose that makes it much more challenging. But it's also why I think it's so crucial for leaders to be vulnerable with their employees, because when you make that balance of power equal, they'll come to you and share these things with you. Whereas if the balance of power feels very unequal and everybody knows it, they're going to be like, well, you know, Jacob's being a jackass, but I'm not going to tell him. Somebody will he'll figure it out in life when nobody wants to work with him anymore. And so it's definitely a tough challenge, I think, for a lot of people to figure out.
So, Jacob, flip side, I'll say this for a minute. As a manager, one of the best questions you can ask your team, I know, do it one-on-one first with your direct reports, and then do it as a team discussion. Are you able to do your very best work every day with peace of mind? Be honest with me. Are you able to do your very best work every day with peace of mind? For some reason, when you ask people with this peace of mind thing, they'll
Yeah.
talk to you. They'll say, well, you know what, Jacob, I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't want to cause any problems. But if you're asking, no, not always, then it's like, okay, do tell. I want to hear. So you're making it safe for them to talk about something. And I think that's important. On the flip side, if you're the employee who wants to talk to the boss, use your feelings as your leverage. Feelings are not right or wrong, they just are. And if I sit with you as my boss and I say, Jacob, I need your help with something if you don't mind. Permission to share. Yeah, what's the matter? No, there's nothing the matter. I just feel like sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed by the way you speak with me. And I don't think you speak with me any different than you do anyone else on the team.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel kind of like hesitant to share ideas, hesitant to volunteer things, hesitant to take a risk. And I know you value that in the employees. So I would just say, to the degree that you're comfortable, if you can kind of think about that a little bit, it would work better for me. Now, how's that going to work? It's going to be different in every situation, Jacob, and I get that. But at least the person, feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are.
Mm.
Sometimes I feel, or at times you make me feel. No one's going to say you have no right to that feeling. They're not going to say that you shouldn't feel that way. The reality is you want to help raise that self-awareness in the manager. Because what executive coaching does is two things. When you coach someone, you're helping them raise their level of self-awareness, number one, raise their level of self-confidence, number two. But to that point, number one, raising self-awareness, it can come from below, it could come from the side, or it can come from above. So think of, again, that's why I say it is a bit of a gift that you're giving to someone who may not realize that they were coming across that way.
Mm. And then what do you do in situations? So I love the two comparisons, by the way, self-awareness and self-confidence for leaders. I think that's a great thing that you're trying to do there. Um, but how do you balance, for example, some people might say, well, you know, it's too soft, right? Because in today's world, there's a lot of that kind of people complain, or the perception is people complain about anything and everything. You were a little bit mean, you raised your voice, you said this to me, you said that to me. And I hear this sometimes inside of organizations where sometimes leaders are like, what the hell's the matter with you? This is a place of work. And yeah, sometimes I might be a little strict, or I might be a little harsh, but like it's business, right? You're not my friend, you're not my buddy. So how do you balance the feedback that you get from employees with the reality of like, hey, don't complain to me about anything and everything? It's almost like having a kid, right? Like I have a 5-year-old son who I talk about a lot on my podcast, Noah. And sometimes he can be a little bit whiny about certain things.
A
And
5-year-old, really? Uh-huh.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And sometimes my job as a parent is to say, hey, you know what? That's not something you should be crying about. Stop whining about that, right? It's teaching him like what are the
Where's the
problems you should
line?
be exactly what are the
Yep.
problems you should be concerned about, and what are not. Like where's the line and where's not. So as a leader, you need to be able to create that balance with your employees too, right? Like where's the line? What do you come to me with? But don't come to me about every little thing, right? If I looked at you a certain way, or if I raised my voice for a second, like you can't just bombard me with every single thing that you don't like. That to me seems like a tough conversation too. So how would you approach that?
So the funny thing about that, though, is that's a little bit more of that's a team meeting. Okay, we've somehow lost the ability to sit around the campfire
Yeah.
and pass wisdom from the elders to the younger gen. We don't do it. We're looking at our phones. We're scrambling to get our work done. Every manager is an individual contributor, and they've got their own deliverables. And
Yep.
oftentimes that takes precedence over this idea of managing others or leading people effectively. What I would say, though, is this. The coaching approach, the whole idea of being a coach is I'm not giving you the fish. I'm teaching you how to fish, right? I'm trying to grow leaders. I'm trying to grow future managers and executives. And this is what I talk to my team about. And I would say things like not telling them, don't come to me every time. Don't do it that way. Just say, okay, you guys, you be me. Put yourself in my shoes. When should I expect to hear from you when something is wrong? And when shouldn't I? And be honest and think about when I should have expectations that my team is accountable and my team is delivering and they don't need to come to me for everything and they're getting their own work done. Like, what's this picture look like? If you were me and you had a team of 4 or 40 or whatever it happens to be, or 400,
Yeah.
what should that look like and what should that feel like? And what you're doing is you're making the space to tease out of them the answers. Because 9 times out of 10, Jacob, they're going to have the right answer. And you didn't have to tell them. And even once in a while when they kind of get it wrong or they're off a little bit, you can ask some qualifying questions to kind of get them right where you want them. And then you can close that meeting by saying, yeah, I agree, you guys. Look, sometimes if I bark a little bit, I apologize. But we're moving so fast, all of us. But the other thing is, I want you guys to feel like you could do your best work every day with peace of mind. That's really important to me. My job is to grow talents, to grow leaders. I want you guys to be able to replace me at some point. Some of you may never want to do that. You like what you're doing now, and that's fine. But I want to make sure there's camaraderie, there's laughter, there's lightheartedness. I want to make sure there's creativity and innovation. I want to make sure that you're all focused on achievements and your career and professional development and feeling good that what you're doing here at work is helping you build your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Those are my values. I want to hear what your values are too, but that's why it's important that we talk about this stuff so we all get aligned. Now, the funny thing is, I've written about values-based leadership and sharing your top 5 or your top 10 values with your team and then asking them to kind of come back. And people are like, oh, that's soft. They used to call them soft skills, and they used to laugh. Yeah, now when you look at any CEO poll, just Google CEO priorities 2025. You're going to see that now they call it emotional intelligence, but it's the same thing as soft skills. What they learned during COVID, especially having remote workers who might not come to work the next day, they realize their most important assets do go home at night. And if you remember during the Great Resignation, companies couldn't find anybody. All of a sudden, they realized that we can't even see our employees. We don't know if they're going to come back the next day. Our managers better be very good at building relationships and trust and respect and focusing on career and professional development, whatever else is important to our employees. So that's kind of the idea. Look at where the CEOs are looking for. They want this whole idea of emotional intelligence. And so that's an easy thing for you then to talk to your employees about because it helps them grow as leaders themselves.
You are not in human resources anymore. I know your title might have human resources in it, but I can promise you, you are now moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. And the challenge is, where do you as a CHRO go to connect with other peers just like you who are focused on that same thing? I've heard from dozens of CHROs that a lot of the communities out there are ridiculously expensive. You're spending $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. When you go to conferences, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people, and you can't really connect with CHROs. You're constantly being upsold and cross-sold. You're being subjected to speeches and just lots of fluff. That's why I put together a brand new, intimate community for CHROs limited to 100. It's called Future of Work Leaders, and you can check it out at futureofworkleaders.com. And if you're interested in moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience, and you want to connect with other peers just like you who are doing that, but who are not spending a ton of money, they're not getting upsold or cross-sold, no speeches, no fluff, none of that kind of stuff, check out futureofworkleaders.com. You'll be joining CHROs from brands like Johnson & Johnson, Neiman Marcus, Dow, Waste Management, PNC Bank, Northrop Grumman, and dozens of others. Again, futureofworkleaders.com. I can promise you, you will be glad you checked it out, and I hope to see you in there.
Yeah, especially in today's AI-driven world, right? It seems like the conversation around that comes up a lot. But still, you do need to draw a line at some point, right? Because otherwise you end up having conversations about conversations. You know what I mean? Like everyone's going to come to you about anything and everything. Like, for example, you look at somebody like Jamie Dimon, who has come out recently, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and he's kind of like, look, I've had enough of all this stuff. This is the culture I want to create here. You're back in the office. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. Like, you don't like it. It's fine. You can go work somewhere else. I doubt many people are kind of going to him and saying, hey, Jamie, I don't like the way that you did this.
No, not to Jamie Dimon. I don't think so. I don't picture it.
Exactly. But the thing is, like, he is a leader. You know what you're getting with him, right? There's no, same thing with like a Jack Welch, same thing with like a Steve Jobs or like an Elon Musk or any of these types of leaders. Like, you know what you're getting into, and you know that that's how they are. They're very clear about it. They're very honest about it, the culture that they want to create, the environment that they're trying to build. So is part of this the accountability and responsibility of leaders to just be open and honest and upfront about who they are, the culture that they want to create, what they expect, and to just tell employees and say, hey, look, I get it if this isn't for you. That's totally fine. Best of luck somewhere else.
No, that may work for Jamie Dimon. That may have been something that worked for Jack Welch in his GE days. I just wrote a blog on this. It's so funny that you ask. The reality is this: most of the CEOs that I talk to aren't coming to me saying, I've got productivity paranoia. I don't know where these people are. They need to be back on the spot. That's not what they're saying. What I'm hearing from most business owners and CEOs is, Paul, I feel so bad for this younger gen. They miss their high school days. They miss their college days. They miss walking at their graduation. The most important part of my career was my first 10 years when I was working. I developed the strongest friendships, mentorships. People took me under their wing. They're missing out on all that stuff. And you know what? Truthfully, it hurts us because our culture suffers. The teamwork suffers. in an environment where we want collaboration and innovation and creativity, you can only do so much by Zoom. And I wish that we can kind of get to the point where, okay, we're 3 days back, but we want to move to 4 days. But how do I tell them that? Because
Yeah.
I feel it's going to be a real backlash. And the point when I wrote this blog, it's on my blog if anyone wants to see it. But the whole point to me, Jacob, is lead with your heart. Be honest about this stuff. That's what you need to share, if that's truly how you feel. Now, is it wrong, quote unquote, wrong for Jamie Dimon to do what he wants to do? Or that's what they did at Amazon. But for what I'm reading about at Amazon, when Bezos came out and said, back to work or see you later, a lot of people left Amazon and they went down the hill to Microsoft. And a lot of programmers who worked for Amazon in the past now work for Microsoft because they felt disrespected. They felt like it didn't matter. The company did not care about them personally, did not care about their career and professional development, treated them like trash. So out you go. So all I'm saying is, while it'll work for a Jamie Dimon and a Jack Welch, be careful to think that, well, therefore, I'm going to do that. Most people don't have the ability of a Jamie Dimon or a Jack Welch to do these kinds of things. And even if they did, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The idea is, if we know that Gen Y millennials, the 45 and under crowd, Gen Z Zoomers, the 27 and under crowd, are the most studied generational cohorts in world history, and we know what they want. They want to work for a company that is ethical, doing meaningful work, for a management team that cares about them personally. Now, just stay with that for a minute. I'm a boomer. I wanted the same thing, but they didn't study my generation. They didn't have the infrastructure in place to do that. But if this is what they want, guess what? That's what most of us would want. So rather than saying, I want to be Jack Welch and just come in with a steamroller and roll over, if you're not happy, there's the door. That's fine. You can do that, but it may not be in your company's best interest because you may lose a lot of people. And even if they stay, you will have lost their heart. And that's not really worth it. Then they're just punching a clock.
Yeah. I'm actually I was trying to look this up while you were speaking about how many employees Amazon may have lost to Microsoft. I can't find. Do you know what that number was? Was there like an article or something that highlighted that workforce loss?
No, I didn't. I don't know offhand. I'd have to look.
Okay.
I was listening to a lecture myself from a professor, I think at Berkeley, who was doing that talk and gave that example. So I borrowed it from,
Got it.
from
Got
the
it.
lecture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not in favor of any kind of the tough love mentality from a leadership perspective.
It didn't work for me. I'm not saying it can't work for other people, but I'm Italian, right? I got a heart. I'm a softie. It's like I want to know, like when I've been laid off in the past. I've been laid off. I've been in the entertainment industry. It's shrunk a lot, and some managers are like, "Today is your last day," and blah 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 blah. And it's like ugh. Other people, it's like my boss was crying. She felt so bad that she had to lay me off, and I hugged her and I made her feel better. And I said, "Don't worry, I'm going to be okay." The question is, what kind of experience do you want to have with your employees? It's not going to be that the Paul Falcone method works for everybody, and I get that. But even when I wrote that book on the 101 Tough Conversations, it's like, look, there's certain things that we know. Because when you look at Gen Y and you look at Gen Z, and truthfully, you can extrapolate that and say this applies to Gen X and the boomers too. They want career and professional development, right? We understand that. They want diversity of thoughts, ideas, and voices. Okay, fair enough. They want corporate social responsibility, environmentalism, and sustainability. What can my company do to make the world a better planet? They want work-life family balance and control and equilibrium. And is there anything that we can do to kind of fit that need? But look at those top 5 needs. And you're going to be a smart employer and you're going to be in sync with the gens if you're doing these things because these are the right things to do. Same thing, though. You got to look at the CEO surveys. What are the CEOs saying that they want? They want innovation and creativity. They want accountability. They want ability to lead through crisis, which is another book I had written lately based on that research. There are certain things that they want, but what does collaboration mean? It means communication. It means team building. It means strong leadership. This is what they're looking for in today's world. So try and study that stuff and figure out, where, if you're a business owner or you're an executive or you're a manager or you're an individual employee who wants to get into management, how do I do this? And with the help of Google and any AI software you want, you can start plugging this stuff in and get answers, but you're looking at things now from the 30,000 foot strategic level, and you're able to build your career and your leadership brand based on those bigger trends.
Yeah. You're much nicer than I am. I mean, because and by the way, I don't want to make it sound, and I have a smaller team of people that I work with. We have almost 10 of us. I agree, like some of your approach, like it's the parenting styles, right? There's the four types of parenting styles: authoritative, authoritarian, permissive parenting, and then neglectful. And I think a lot of the research out there that was done says that the best type of parenting are the authoritative, where they're not authoritarian, where they're kind of like dictators that come in and say do this or you're in trouble, but they have very firm guidelines and standards and expectations and structure, and they make sure that to teach their kids that this is our house. Like these are the rules that we have, the guidelines, the standards. These are chores that you have. Yes, we treat you well, we love you, we don't hit you, things of that nature. But at the same time, you're part of the family. You have to learn certain things. And I find that inside of organizations, that approach can also work really well. And again, it's not that you don't care about your employees. You still treat them well. You give them opportunities to learn and grow and develop. You still care about them as human beings. The employee experience still matters. But at the same time, you do need to have that accountability, the standards, the competence aspects. Like, here's what is expected of you. Like, you have to show up, do your best, because it's sort of a balance on both sides. And I think what the challenge that I have found over the past few years when I was writing these books on employee experience is that oftentimes we always assume it's the organization's responsibility, but employees also play a big role, right? So for example, if you are not exercising or eating healthy or going outside or making time for social activities, and you're playing video games all day, and you just show up to work and say, hey, I'm lonely and I'm disengaged, fix me, it's not the company's responsibility to do that for you, right? At a certain point, you're an adult. You have a mortgage, you have a car, maybe you have kids. Like, you have to take some responsibility and accountability over your own life, your own decisions. So there does need to be, I think, that balance. And that one of the challenges that I see with a lot of these well-being programs that companies are investing in is they tell their employees we want them to be resilient, but a lot of these programs teach their employees to not be resilient, right? Because if you show up to work and the company's doing everything for you, here's your food, here's your financial planning, here's a therapist that you can talk to, here's this, here's that. At a certain point, employees become so dependent on that. What happens if they leave your company? They can't do anything by themselves. So I think there's a balance between organizations figuring out what do we invest in, what do we provide, how do we convey this message to employees around, we do value you as a team member, we care about you, but this is not a family. You are an employee. There is an exchange of value here. So I don't know, do you agree with that approach, or do you think I'm totally off base?
I think you are 100% correct.
Okay.
The question is always this: how do you get there? And everyone is going to have to define that for themselves. So let me give a quick example. I've always talked about having an iron hand with a velvet glove. Okay, the iron hand is there. They know, and this is with the kids too. This is where we raised our kids too. It's like, no, they know what the expectations are, but how you deliver it is really, really important.
Did you make that up, by the way, or is that a quote?
No, it's mine.
Iron hand with a velvet
glove.
Oh,
yep. Okay, so wait. So here's your scoop. You've got a top sales producer in your branch, brings in 80% of the revenue, right? Month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year. Is a toxic personality. Very difficult to deal with. Bad attitude. Just people avoid him, the whole 9 yards. But the goose that laid the golden egg. How do you talk to that person? So what I've always said was, look, you can make them feel judged and say, you always do this, you never do that. I can't believe that you're still blah, blah, blah. Do it that way and you're going to lose them. Do it a different way. Take a back of a napkin. And I'm serious, Jacob. Take a back of a napkin and draw a circle. And say, listen, I want you to follow me with what I'm doing. I'm drawing the circle. I'm cutting it in half. You see, I'm putting the line in the middle. The top half of the circle, I'm writing the word performance. In the bottom half of the circle, I'm writing the word conduct. You okay? You following me? Performance versus conduct. Yep. Okay, let me talk to you about your performance for a minute. Your performance, my friend, rocks. You are stellar. You are doing so well. I will do everything I can to contribute to make you a stronger sales producer, because month after month and quarter after quarter, you're the bomb. You're making it all happen. So this isn't really about that. But tell me why you think I'm calling this meeting with you right now. And because of the bottom half of the circle, Yeah. What specifically? Conduct. Yeah. Or behavior. What about it? Well, you're thinking, Paul, that I'm not contributing enough to the team, or people are finding it hard to deal with me. Look, I'm busy. These people need to figure it out on their own, just like I do. Whoa. Hang on. Not asking you to blame them. This is not, no. This is about you and your career and professional development. There's something that may be missing awareness that could hold you back. You know the expression, they say the most important decisions about your career are going to be made when you're not in the room. That's the same for you as it is for me, as it is for everybody else. And if you only see yourself in terms of half of this circle, half the deliverable, there's going to be opportunities that are going to go by and you're not going to know. But what I'm here to tell you is if I can get you to be as strong in the bottom half of the circle as you are in the top, your career goes through the roof. It's all about what they call emotional intelligence and communication and team building and leadership and trust and respect. If you can become that in the bottom half of the circle, you will become the director and the VP and the SVP and whatever else you want to do. But if you feel like, listen, I'm a top producer in the top half of the circle, I never have to worry about people just going to have to get around me because this is who I am. Yeah. You're going to miss things because they're going to know that you're not someone who can build teams and build trust with peers. Do you see the difference? And the reason why I'm calling this meeting with you is I want to help you fix this right here, right now. I will have your back. I want you to make this a personal and professional goal for yourself. But my expectation is going to remain the same. Even if you don't want me to be your coach and your mentor, I'm fine. But from this point forward, I expect you to demonstrate role model leadership. I expect people to seek you out for help in terms of how to become a better sales producer because you do it so well. But you've got to give away that gift. And that's my expectation of you. And truthfully, if you're not willing to do it, you have to really think about whether this is the right place for you. Because I don't know that it will be. I won't be able to grow any teams because you're kind of sucking up all the oxygen. Yeah. You see the difference? And so this is how you can have a conversation with someone where again, my expectations are high. I have fired hundreds of people in my career. Not that I'm proud of it. I'm just saying I know how to pull the plug, but I also know how to grow them and develop them so that they can, again, some people will hear it on the spot. They'll be like, okay, I get it. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Other people need to sleep on it for a couple of nights and then they'll come back to me. And other people will quit and say, I've been offended by this guy. And I don't know. I can't look in people's hearts.
Where people just quit and they're like, I was offended.
No, I've never. Actually, I've not. I've had great stability on all my teams. I've not had people leave. If they feel like they're at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, they're hitting it on all cylinders, the boss really likes them, they're in the in crowd, they're not leaving for 20%. It ain't worth it. You're going to end up going somewhere else. You can have someone who spits fire and throws chairs. But when you like what you're doing and you feel acknowledged and you feel recognized and you feel like you're building your LinkedIn profile and your resume with new bullets and achievements and blah, 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 you're not going anywhere. Why would you want to? So that's generally speaking. I'm not saying I haven't lost people. Of course I have. But if you leave my shop as a manager because you were able to get a director gig elsewhere, that's cause for celebration. I want to celebrate that. We didn't have the headcount or the opportunity, but because of your work on my team, you were able to get a director level job elsewhere. Congratulations. On the other hand, if you left my job as a manager, my company, and you went somewhere else as a manager, that's regrettable turnover. Now I got to scratch my head and say, what did I do wrong? What was I missing? And I'm going to have a meeting with the person and say, tell me about what didn't connect.
Yeah, no, I like that approach of performance and conduct, right? Those two circles and having conversation around that. I think that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the common traps that you see people falling into when having a difficult conversation? Like one of them, for example, I know that I've fallen into and I've seen people fall into is the conversation becomes a character assassination conversation. So instead of focusing on the issue, you focus on the person. You did this, you did that. I know that can be a very, very tough thing. And like I said, I've fallen into that trap all the time. Are there some other common traps that people fall into during the tough conversations that you see?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest trap of all is just not having the conversation. I mean,
that's really altogether.
Yeah. And then they come into my office in human resources and they want the person gone. And not for anything. I say, all right, well, give me a second. Let me look in their personnel file. All the performance reviews are beautiful. Person exceeded expectations for the last 3 years. There's no progressive discipline. And now you're telling me you want a summary termination or an immediate termination because the person didn't do a project well. You can't do that. There is such a thing as a summary termination, but it's on the bottom half of that circle. It's with conduct related stuff, Jacob. So think
Yeah.
about it. Theft, embezzlement, fraud, forgery. Yeah, one and done, you're out. But not when it comes to performance on the top half of the circle. There you got to go through steps, typically, what they call progressive discipline, or putting things in writing and making sure that you can defend your decision if that person were to try and make a lawsuit against the company. So that's where the managers fall down. And what I learned early on in my career was, you know what? I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want my clients, the managers, coming to me and saying, we want to fire the guy. And once again, HR won't let us fire anybody. It's like, that's noise and that's drama. So I started doing management training workshops every time I went into a new company to make them understand how I look at these things and help them kind of build muscle around that and build self-confidence in that area. And then it was all aligned. And 3 years ago, when I left my corporate career behind me and I opened my consulting firm, that's a lot of what I do. I go into companies and I help their managers understand how this stuff all comes together and how it works. Give them their spine back. A lot of managers are afraid to do anything these days because they're afraid of being sued when they don't
No,
have to be afraid of it.
That's part of the problem, right?
It is.
It's managers are, I think you said, right? Give them their spine back. So what happened? Like, where did it go? Because I feel like managers used to very much have that spine. It seems like it went away somewhere. We're starting to bring it back. Like, what's going on with this evolution? How is this happening and why?
Yeah. Well, okay, the world is getting a lot more complex, right? With laws around FMLA and ADA carrying punitive damage potential. I mean, managers aren't trained in this stuff, nor they should they be, and they're nervous about it. So that's one issue. But the other issue, truthfully, it's the lawyers. Lawyers come into companies and they do training. And in California, every 2 years, managers have to go through sexual harassment training because Arnold Schwarzenegger mandated it when he was governor X amount of years ago. But the reality is, all they teach you is there's quid pro quo harassment and there's hostile work environment harassment. And the average settlement in California is, and everyone's afraid to put their socks on in the morning.
Yeah.
What they don't do in those trainings is they say, here's a script, make it your own. But this is how you talk to your team about respect in the workplace so that this never becomes a problem. And this is how you can talk about it occasionally in your staff meetings and how to bring it up and how to coach people through these things and how to raise their awareness. Make it part of who you are. It's part of your DNA. It's part of your fabric. Respect in the workplace shouldn't be something that you do every 2 years. Respect in the workplace training, they call it, because they don't want to call it sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Give me a break. But everyone gets to a point where, look, every manager is an individual contributor with their own deliverables. And all of a sudden they see something that could be liability. And when they remember that they went to this training a couple of months ago that said, oh, you can get punitive damage. So they just look the other way. And that's not cool. Managers don't even realize that they've got a lot more discretion with conduct at the bottom of the circle than they do with the performance on the top of the circle. For example, you can move to immediate termination for theft. Time card fraud, hate to say it, that's theft, right? Time is a proxy for money in the workplace. They steal time from the company. It's a terminable offense. Talk to your employees, especially the ones who are recent graduates who don't know about this stuff. They were never taught that either. Yeah. Share that wisdom. Sit around that campfire. Make them understand what those expectations are. And you'll be building stronger leaders in the process who are more self-aware and more self-confident. They don't have to go around being afraid of everything either. Everyone's afraid of tying their shoes these days. It's too much. We need to kind of take that time, quiet the room, and give people back to themselves.
And I wonder if part of this was, too much rule, too much regulation, too much stipulation, too much government involvement, too much of this coming in, or too much psychological safety. I had Peter Capelli on my podcast as well, who did some research fairly recently. I think it was a year or two ago. And he said that you can actually have too much psychological safety inside of a company where, no idea is viewed as bad, the standards go down. And his argument was a little bit is enough. Like, you don't need people to feel like you don't have the right to not be offended when you show up to work. Like, that's not part of the agreement, right? Sometimes you're going to be offended. Sometimes somebody's going to say something stupid. Sometimes you'll get in a debate. Sometimes you're going to get in an argument. That's fine. But if you expect to show up to work where it's like this blissful utopia of Pinocchio's island where you're never going to get offended or disciplined or reprimanded, that's too much psychological safety. You can have a bad idea. You can ask a stupid question, right? So that was a lot of his argument, is that you can have too much of this.
You can have too much of anything. I totally agree with that. Our job is not to hold people's hands. These are adults. So one of the things that I've always taught you, let me give a quick example. What I've done with my teams and what I recommend when I do my training is once a year annual performance reviews are not enough. If we know these gens want career and professional development, what does that mean? My answer, quarterly meetings. And now people are like, quarterly, I don't have time to do the annual. I'm like, no, slow down. You understand what I'm saying? These are adults. So I tell my employees, you set the time on my calendar, number one. You set the agenda for the meeting, number two. My job is simply to listen and coach. And then I can talk to them about, look, I want you to focus on career and professional development. I want to hear about your achievements. I want to hear about your goals and how you're doing towards your goal setting. I want to hear about what suggestions you have for making the team operate more effectively. Whatever you want to talk about, I'm there. Book it for 30 minutes. We don't necessarily need 30 minutes. You don't have to put anything in writing. I just want to have a little one-on-one time with you to hear about where you're at, how I can help, and how we can make things better. That's all it is. But I also want them to give an objective assessment of their performance and their achievements and how they're doing in the various areas. So I set that expectation up with them. I give them a little list of things that they can talk about. They don't have to stay on that list, but I want them to have ideas of what it is that Paul's expecting to hear from me, because a lot of them have never done it before. But again, they set the time, they set the agenda, I listen. You'd be surprised how that builds strong bonds with people. And then when you're doing that on a more regular basis, they're not going to have a hard problem coming to you and saying, hey, Paul, permission, can I talk to you about something that's really bothering me that you're doing?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, I'm fine with that. That's psychological safety. That's enough for me. For some people, they may say, that's too much. We don't even do annual reviews in this company. Just do your job and you'll be fine. You find where you fit on that spectrum. But to me, I think it's important because if we know what they want and we can get them to get themselves there, my job is just to kind of move them in a certain direction and give them space. That's all a real great manager does, because that's what my managers did for me. They gave me room to figure it all out on my own, and they were there when I needed help, just like my parents. I mean, that's kind of, to me, where the healthy balance is.
What advice do you have for leaders of this conversation of getting your spine back? Because I've heard stories of leaders inside of organizations who don't want to say anything because they're getting accused of being racist. They're getting accused of being ageist. They're getting accused of being all sorts of things, right? If people don't, and you can attribute this to a victimhood mentality. I've heard people talk about it in regards to DEI. I don't care what you want to call it, but it seems like in the business world, there is a vibe of, if I don't like something that you say, I'm going to come after you with a pitchfork. And so I understand why a lot of leaders are struggling with this, because they don't want to be labeled, you pick whatever the label is, negatively, because they can in fact impact their career. I've heard stories of this happening to teachers, to leaders inside of organizations. Like, it's been happening a lot. So on the one hand, we want to tell leaders, hey, you need to have your spine, you need to be confident, like you need to be saying these things. But on the other hand, a lot of leaders are coming back and saying, well, if I speak up and I get accused of something where my employees push back, I'm going to get in trouble. So how do you tell leaders out there, get a spine while we see this, I don't know, turbulent business climate, if that's what you want to call it, in the corporate world?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it is a turbulent business climate.
It is.
And that's just the reality of where we are today. The funny thing is unions are teaching workers what professionalism in the workplace should feel like. And if you're not getting this from your manager, you need to come to us and then we'll organize your company.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? This is kind of, that's where this is at. I know the Gen Z, the Zoomers, tend to be sensitive about these things. And okay, that's fine. But younger generations should be. I was too, as a when I was a kid. Granted, I was a boomer, but you come into the world and into the business world and you think everything is going to be pie in the sky. And yes, there are managers who need to have those kind of conversations with me. For me, though, my style is I want to speed it up. I'm not going to wait for people to step on landmines and come into my office and explode. I want to talk to them and kind of share that wisdom and help them understand that stuff. So if I have a weekly staff meeting, maybe 5 minutes of it is dedicated to kind of the wisdom piece of it. But I want to share that so that they understand how things look from both perspectives. The final thing I'd say on that, Jacob, to me is it's like, look, there's too much drama out there. One of the things that I learned, and remember I told you I write about values-based leadership. I learned it from Mark Taylor, who was the general manager of Nickelodeon Animation, Nickelodeon, when I was there. Best leader I ever worked for. And Mark had his rule of 8. He had his great 8 rules, and he would meet with every new hire class and talk with them about my 8 rules. And he said, you guys, you may have your own, and I understand that, but I've been here for 2 decades, and the culture of this organization is very special. And I hold each of you accountable for perpetuating this culture and making sure that people can do their best work and people feel creative and people feel supported and they feel like we have each other's backs. So let me go over my 8 rules with you. And then he'd go through it and he'd say, number 1, have one another's backs and always bring out the best in your coworkers. Number 2, have fun, keep it light. This is all about creativity and innovation. Number 3, hold yourself accountable for both your performance and your conduct. Make sure you're paying forward your gifts. Number 4, but for me, when I do my own 8, I don't use Mark's. My 8th one is always no drama. I don't do drama. And I need to tell that to people because they need to understand if I ever say drama, you need to move in a different direction because that's Paulie's hotspot. I don't like going down that path. Yeah. To the point, every time I talk to someone, am I afraid I'm going to get an ageism claim if the person I'm talking to is over 40? That's drama. Of course not. Yeah. Throw that noise out in the garbage. Okay, yes, I hire people diversely. I talk to people diversely. It makes no difference. People are people. But they have to see that in you. That's where the trust and the respect and your brand comes through. When people say, oh, that's Paul Falcone, he would never do something like that. He's not that kind of person. It's a little different than when they say, oh, yeah, I'm surprised it took this long for HR to hear about it because he does that all the time. You know what I mean? There's a practicality to this. And I just think we don't spend enough time focusing on career introspection. We promote people from individual contributor to manager, and off you go. Call me if you have any questions. I'm here.
Yeah.
Where's the training and where's the development? And it's hard, and we're not really executing on that very well.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just like employees want to feel like leaders have their back, leaders want to feel like their leaders have their back, right? So if you are a mid-level leader inside your organization and employees are coming after you, assuming they're accusing you of stuff, it's important for your leaders to have your back too and say, hey, we don't have a place for that here. But if you have leaders who aren't supporting their leaders, your senior executives, your CEO who are supporting their mid-level leaders, the mid-level leaders are in a very tough spot because they don't have support from the people above them. They don't have support from people who are in front of them. And I think that's why in today's business world, it's the mid-level leaders who are not struggling, but they are struggling, but they're also in the hardest spot because a lot of what we're talking about today, whether it comes to culture, falls on them. They're the culture evangelists, the culture champions, but at the same time, they get the brunt of everything. So if something isn't going well, the employees are the ones pushing at them and the leaders are pushing at them from the bottom. Like, why isn't this happening? And employees are like, we're not happy. You're not doing this. You're this. And so leaders have to support leaders, and I think that's one of the best ways that you can help develop that spine that you said is missing in the corporate world, which I totally agree. I know we only have a couple minutes left. I thought we could wrap up with maybe just 1 or 2 strategies that you might recommend for people to take when it comes to having difficult conversations. So if you had to outline maybe 1 or 2 specific things that we can do, what would those be?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is don't come across as judgmental. Don't make people feel less than.
How do you do that?
Well, think about coaching your message in terms of their career and professional development. Okay? Like we said, if you were to say something like the most important decisions in your career are going to be made when you're not in the room, and that's the same for all of us. So let me help you so that when that meeting happens in that proverbial room at some point in the future, while you're not there to defend yourself, you're going to still stand out in your strongest light. You open up, or, as a manager, I wouldn't be doing you a service if I didn't share with you, Paul, that at times you can come across as. There's a softness to it. Now, I'm still saying you got a bad attitude and you got to change it. But I'm making people, the recipient of the message, feel like I'm doing it for their benefit, not to judge them or make them feel like they're in trouble, so to speak.
Okay, so that's a gift.
That's the gift.
Okay.
That's the gift part of it.
Yeah, which is a great one. I love that a lot.
No, you like the Iron Hand with the velvet glove.
Those are my 2 favorite from this.
Yeah. No, I'm good. The other thing I'd say, Jacob, generally speaking, is we need to slow down a little bit. Career introspection is more important than we think, and most of us are kind of, we're jet propelled into a role of manager and director and VP and SVP and all, but we've never really had the chance to think about who do you want to be. Yeah. As an executive coach, when I talk with people, one of the first questions I'll ask a new client is, be honest with me. would you want to work for you? And they look at me and it's like, that's a really hard question to answer because sometimes yes, but sometimes no. And tell me about it. Or the other question is, if the whole company followed your lead in terms of your role model behavior and conduct, and if the whole company followed your lead, would you be happy with where you took it? I think managers need to think about this stuff. We're telling everyone else's narrative out there. You must be feared to be a successful leader. You don't want to recognize your employees. It'll go to their head. They'll want more money. This is all baloney. Recognition is the psychic income that keeps people happy. And I'm not saying recognize them for fogging the mirror and doing, showing up. But when there's extraordinary effort or extraordinary achievement, call it out for Pete's sake, assuming that the person is comfortable with you calling them out. But hey, Jacob, that was a great job. We're really proud of you. Do tell, how did you save that client? We want to hear all about it. Makes people feel proud of themselves. It builds their self-confidence. Don't be the manager who manages by error. And what that means is, I'm doing the exit interview, and the person says, Paul, you can kill yourself in this company. You'll never get a word of thanks. But you make one mistake, they're all over you.
Yeah, that's never.
And that's this management by mistake. You don't want to do that. Catch the kids being good. This is what they teach the teachers when they're learning to teach young kids. Catch them being good, because they're going to repeat whatever calls your attention to them. And if the only thing that calls your attention to them is when they're doing bad things, like pulling people's hair and putting gum on their, then that's what they're going to do, because they want your attention one way or the other.
Yeah, and I mentioned my son, a 5-year-old. I also have an 8-year-old daughter, so I'm constantly trying to remind myself of that, because it's very easy to call out like, "Hey, get your feet down, like sit normally, eat this, eat that." But it's much harder to say, "Hey, good job today, good manners." I really like the way that you said that. So even in our house, I try to be more mindful and more conscientious of rewarding the good behaviors that I see instead of just reprimanding for the bad behaviors, which, not always easy. I'm not perfect.
It's not always easy, right? That you have to kind of retrain yourself a little bit, but that's where the career introspection comes in. When I do my seminars or my webinars or my workshops, and I always tell people, look, we're going to spend 90 minutes together. The most important part of this training is not now, it's on your drive home tonight. Because I want you to think about this stuff and figure out, you don't have to knock the whole house down, but look at your foundation. Find one or maybe 2 bricks that are really pretty busted up that you need to replace. If you can replace those 2 bricks, your whole foundation is stronger, as is your whole house. It's that simple.
I love it. Paul, where can people go to learn more about you? Anything that you want to mention for people to check out?
Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Jacob. For me, my website is probably the easiest place. It's just paulfalconehr.com. And that has everything on it. Also on LinkedIn, if they want to reach out, I'm Paul Falcone 1. So they can reach out on LinkedIn too. And
you're active on LinkedIn too. I saw some of your posts on there. And so people will hopefully go to your website, connect with you on LinkedIn. Paul, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jacob. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I will see all of you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.